Hey, Riley besties. Welcome back to the Writing with Anna New podcast, where we talk about all things writing. Today, I have a guest on my podcast. We have Ashley Faye. Say hi,
Hello.
Ash. Oh my gosh, I'm
Hi.
so excited. We've had you on the podcast before, so I'm so excited to have you back. And today, we're going to be talking a lot about writing and
Mhm.
actually, balancing being a writer with being a content creator, with being a student, with being like, someone who works all the time.
Mhm.
And if you know Ash is busy. She's like Superwoman. Like the way that I don't know how she does it. So we're gonna
I
figure
don't know
that out.
either. I'm already busy, and I was like, "I'm gonna start 2 podcasts," and I'm like, "Ashley, what time? When do you have the time for this?" And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna do it."
Exactly.
Oh
So
my
I'm
goodness.
so excited to just hear, about like how you're going, how you've been, balancing these different sort of commitments and
Mhm.
talking about that. So let's go ahead and get straight into the episode. So firstly, I just want to know, how are you and what sort of commitments have you been working on recently, and
Mhm.
any new updates, or just kind of like, tell the listeners what you've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of how I'm doing, well, I'm almost done with this session of classes, so next week I have a final exam to take as well as a very big paper that I need to write, which I haven't even looked at, so
Honestly,
I'm doing well.
mood.
Um, so that's happening, but then I'm also having to prepare because when this session is over and I take that exam, my next classes start the very next day. So I also need to get my textbooks for it
Mm-hmm.
and prepare. Um, and then I do work at a coffee shop that's owned by my parents' pastor. And I work there part-time, so I work like 3 days a week. Um, and then, oh goodness, what else do I do? I do school. I already said school.
You do a
School,
podcast and content
podcast.
and Instagram.
Yes, I do a lot, and I don't really know when I have the time.
You
I'm
just make
definitely
it.
that type that is, motivated by her moods.
Mhm.
So started like, me and my friend were like, "Oh, what if we start a fangirl podcast?" And I'm like, "We're doing it." And then after that, I was
Right.
like, "You know what? I wanna do one for a writing podcast." And then I did it, and I was like, "Ashley, you just
Mm.
created 2 podcasts, and when are
Which
you gonna
is
have the time to
so
do this?"
cool. I mean, like, honestly, it's really great to, like, have that sort of spark of motivation, because if you didn't do it
Mhm.
now, like, finding excuses is, like, extremely easy. So these
Yeah.
projects fulfill you in a way. So, yeah, you're struggling. I mean, not struggling, sorry.
Well, I am struggling. Let's be real. It's a struggle.
Yeah, because you're a psychology student in
Mhm.
like, school, you have like a job, you work at a
Mhm.
cafe, you have an amazing Instagram, and you're balancing two podcasts. Like that is an amazing commitment on top of everything, like family, like just,
Mhm.
you know, your relationships with people, friendships. So I guess my other question is, how do you think like you balance these sort of commitments, and do you kind of prioritize one over the other? Where do your priorities lie? And if you had like any like tips of like coping that you want to share with the audience, or just like how has your experience been going
Mhm.
with that?
Um, it has I wouldn't say that I'm a pro at honestly organizing my life. Like, I do have a lot of
Hmm.
commitments.
Yeah.
Um, I do feel like school is a very high priority just because I did leave university, and then I didn't plan on going back for, like, 2 years, and then God called me into, like, being a biblical counselor, so I then had to go back
Mm-hmm.
into school. But
Wow.
taking that calling into consideration, that also meant I had to get the money to go back to school. So
Hmm.
since I already know that I had to get more money, which I don't have and that I've already had to do in the past, it's just, motivated. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not pressured. Um,
I see.
my brain is not braining.
It's
Um,
okay.
but that kind of thinking has made me want to do my very best in school and to make sure that
Mm.
I'm getting everything done. I am someone that will put a bit too much pressure on myself. So right now, like, I
Mm.
have A's, but I'm still like, whenever there's a deadline, I like freak out. So I'll feel the rush and I'll
Oh,
just eat, sleep, and do homework.
that's
So
crazy.
I have found a bit more of trying to balance it in
Mhm,
terms
mhm,
of prayer, which has been very
mm,
helpful.
mm.
And obviously, like, I've been trying to give myself more breaks. Like, I need
Yeah.
to get things done, but there have been times when I'm like, okay, well, I need to do this. And I did a 5-page paper within a few hours. And then I did all these things and I was just completely burnt out and I still had homework to do, but I
Mm-mm.
had no energy or motivation to get it done.
Yeah.
So I've tried to implement more breaks and I'm a very big K-drama girly. So I'll do like, okay, my break, I'm gonna watch a K-drama episode.
Yeah.
Um, which are also usually an hour long. So it's a really nice break. It's
It
very
is.
nice. But I do also like to journal as well.
Journaling is really good.
I try to maybe do a bit of free write, but sometimes if there's like a particular issue that keeps
Mm,
coming up, I like to actually go into it and try to figure out what's going on and what's the root of it,
right.
using some of my psychology knowledge. Um, but definitely just trying to find ways that provide rest,
Right.
even if it's just for a little bit. So I do try to have some of my fun hobbies as ways
Mm,
to give myself breaks.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I definitely don't have a system down. Like I definitely try to, but I will get distracted and I'll be like, I'm going to do
yeah.
this, but I want to start from scratch. And then I'll
Mm,
start it, but then I'll be like, oh, what if I did this? And I try that. And then my system is just too scattered.
mm.
Um, so yeah,
Wow.
I think those would be what I would say are
Yeah.
kind of the main things is like prayer, journaling, rest
Taking
through
breaks.
watching
Yeah.
TV. These
Yeah.
I like reading, but when you're reading like
No,
over 50
I get
pages of
it.
homework,
Yep. Yep.
it's hard.
I know. It is pretty hard,
Mhm.
especially with psychology. There'll be a lot of text. Do you like textbook readings? Is that a lot?
Yeah. So I do have like right now I'm reading a book about like family therapy, which is definitely a lot more of like a textbook. While with
Mm.
other ones that I have read, they're a bit more like nonfiction books. One book that I read, I actually have it right here. I actually really love this book. Um, it's called Suffering and the Heart of God. And
Ooh.
she talks about the author talks about trauma and how
Mm. Mhm.
um, just about how there is healing through it, but it's found in the presence of God and how
Right.
God has actually used things to help people because
Mhm,
everything
mhm.
happens for a reason. And it's hard in the moment to be like, okay, why did God allow this to happen to me? But then you start to see some of the reasons why later on. Um, so it was a very good read. It was very convicting for me with my own trauma. So
Yeah.
I did shed a lot of tears
Oh, that's
reading this.
great.
Um,
Mm, mm.
but yeah, so it's kind of mixed readings. Like we'll read stuff like this, or there will be articles that we'll read, peer-reviewed journals, stuff like
Yeah.
that.
That's good. I think it's good to be constantly reading because it does help obviously stimulate your brain, but sometimes it gets very repetitive. But I loved all the tips you gave, especially about prayer. Like that has transformed my
Mhm.
life, and I definitely should pray a lot more. But it's so good. It just like gives you so much like stillness and peace in the
And it
most chaotic
directs your
day.
attention from yourself and your troubles onto God.
Mm,
So it
exactly.
helps redirect who's actually in charge and who's there for you.
Period. That was great. You literally speak like a literal like psychologist. It's
I
crazy.
think.
Okay, we can get on to the last sort of questions.
Mhm,
This is a bit more of a fun question about how your commitments, or at least your life experiences through school, through working at a cafe, through doing writogram and
mhm.
podcasting. How has that like inspired you through your books and your ideas, and maybe yes, sort of shaped your characters or the plots or the things that you've been more interested in, like
Mhm.
writing sense in your writing? Yeah, like what's been inspiring you?
Yeah, usually so I will get inspiration. There was one story that I actually really wanted to write. It was actually a story that I talked a little bit about on my podcast, where it was a
Mm,
NaNoWriMo project, and basically it was inspired by like, I was in a wedding in 2021 as a maid of honor, and
mm,
in
mhm,
that wedding experience, there's, like, the bride. tosses the bouquet. Um, the bride ended up using my bouquet, and I wanted to catch it because I wanted to have my flowers. So
Yeah.
I inevitably catch the flowers, and then but I didn't completely know the meaning behind the bouquet toss. So
Mm.
then people start coming up to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're next. Who's the lucky guy?" And I'm like, I immediately dropped it on the ground and I was like, "There's no one." I was like, I'm
No
actually
way.
very single. But after that, I was like, what if a main character goes to a wedding and she catches a bouquet, but then she starts to notice a lot of guy attention, but she's the most single person ever.
That is crazy.
Um, so I still think I might touch on it again, but because I pushed myself too hard during NaNoWriMo, I don't have a strong love for the story anymore.
Mm,
But I
mhm,
do still think it's important for me to write personally, so I
mhm.
might go back to it, but that was really inspired by my own personal experience because I went to a
Mhm.
Christian private university. Everyone that I know now is married and at least has 2 kids.
Wow.
Like, that was
It
the
is pretty
culture.
crazy. Right, right. Mhm.
But that was one that I know that immediately inspired a story. But there are, like, other interactions that will happen where I'm like, "Oh, what about this?" Or
Mhm.
stuff like that, just because when you work at a coffee shop, you are introduced to a whole lot.
Yep.
There's a lot that
Mhm.
happens. Especially with where I work, it's a lot more of like a small town, kinda country vibes to where, like, people will just come in and start talking with you. Like, you don't know who they are, but they'll give you their life story,
That's crazy.
or confide
Yeah.
in you. So it's definitely not like a fast-paced environment where it's like, "I want a caramel macchiato," curt nod, takes the mobile
Mhm.
order and leaves. Like, it's a lot more
Mhm.
personal.
Mm.
Um, and I I have heard phone conversations with customers, from across the bar where, like, she picks up her drink and she gets a call, like, this woman's probably in her late 30s, and I think she's talking to her boyfriend, but she, like, is on the phone and she's like, "Well, did you clean the house?" And then you just hear mumbling and she's like, "No clean house, no beer." And then she,
Ah!
like, marches out, and I was like, that's a way to get your husband or your boyfriend to clean the house, I guess. You just have to
Yeah.
bribe them with beer, like but I would hear stuff like that, and they would literally leave, and I would be like, "Did that just happen?"
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
"What?" Um, but that's, like, one of the most noteworthy things that's happened, or there will be kids that come in, and they're
Mm,
just
mhm.
adorable, and they'll try to play with things. Um, there are obviously, like, guy stuff that probably happens, but I'm so oblivious to guy attention. Like, if ever they actually flirt with me, I'm just so nice about it. Like,
Aw,
I think they're
Ash.
just being friendly. Like, I accidentally friend zone them because I don't realize that they're actually hitting on me.
I love that. Aw. Yeah.
So, why am I single? Because a guy needs to be very, very clear.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff happens to where maybe I'm inspired by maybe some character interactions.
Yeah, for
But the
sure.
only one that really inspired a full-on story was Project FS, where a single girl starts to notice a lot of guy attention after she catches the
Mm. Mhm. What
but
about, yeah, that's really cool. I love learning about those stories, especially that story you shared before the podcast. But what about psychology? And this is kinda like the
Mhm.
last sort of question about what have you been, like, learning in class? Has that shaped the way that you view the world or the characters
Mhm.
or, yeah, the sort of psychology of your book and what you want your book to say or mean?
Yeah.
How does that work?
So I learned a lot because last session I took crisis and trauma, so that was a lot more focused
Mm,
on
mm.
how, it really hit me at home because of, like, my own trauma. Like, I started to learn things about myself, where a child's upbringing, like, the first 5 or 9 years, I think, is the most influential, so anything, even if it's a trauma
Yes.
or something like that, it can drastically affect how they regulate their emotions.
Mm.
So, just the fact that, like, your brain and stuff like that can be like, "Okay, this is a time to get ready for attack, and then this is time to slow
Wow.
down."
Oh my
If a
gosh.
big enough trauma happens in a kid's childhood, it can affect that function to where they're
Yeah.
always in ready to fight mode. And that's something that I noticed about my own self in my own
Mm, mhm.
childhood. So, learning about that helped me kind of understand things better, and I even learned about attachment styles and how, again,
Mm.
with the child's upbringing, it's so crucial because if anything affects their connection with their parent or their like their mom, their dad, or their sister or sibling, is going to drastically affect how they try to seek out that companionship. Like they could maybe seek out what would be inappropriate with a professor, not
Mm-hmm.
because they're trying to seek anything that would be inappropriate, but because they're trying to find a mentor in someone that should have been their parent. Um, so I definitely try to do a bit of that. I don't, a lot of my stories are more centered on found family because that's my favorite trope.
Yeah, mine
Um,
too, mine too.
and I just find like I'm someone that like my friends are my family. And that was something
Mm,
that I saw a lot as a child where like maybe my family life was not what I wanted it to be, but I wanted to have that kind of family. And I grew up reading fiction and watching fiction of found family. So a core theme in those is about how um, even if they're not by blood, they're still family.
mm,
I do also try to do a bit of representation for mental health, um,
mhm.
especially in terms of anxiety or depression. Um, but also trying to be careful about it because I don't want it to go along the terms of where someone could be like, oh, depression is beautiful because we don't want to romanticize a mental illness.
No.
But we want
Yeah.
to definitely approach it and be like, not every person is perfect. Like they have something. And
Mhm.
especially um, because I am a Christian, but I have been in environments where they hold the philosophy of pray it away, or if you are depressed and you're not trusting in God enough, which is not true.
Right.
Um, so I do like to also touch on that to being like, you can pray to God, God can heal, but there are some things where like there's actually a neurological disconnection in the brain to where there needs to be help that way as well. And medicine is in this world for a reason. Like God
Mm,
has medicine in this world for a reason. God has counselors for a reason. Um,
yeah.
so definitely trying to touch on those as well. Basically, just wanting to have characters to where they they have their issues or they might have their struggles, but to show in them like show in their stories that like they can seek help from others and that they're not always alone. Um, I think that's going to be a clear message in my newest project, Project GH, where the main character just feels like everyone's going to leave her. So she has zero connections, doesn't engage in anyone, only for her to learn that there are still people out there who will care for her. She just needs to keep hoping and that she just has to put her hope in the like her trust in the right people.
Wow.
Um,
Mm.
but that's like one of the messages in there, and she's obviously going to be dealing with like depression. Um, but yeah, I've learned a lot about how psychology is and how it affects behavior, um, and just the way of thinking. So that has helped me kind of learn about how I can understand people better, but also empathize with them because it's a very dark and sinful world, and it's important to approach people because sometimes, especially in the counseling world, they struggle with um, approaching counseling because they think that that's a sign of giving up or they're scared of judgment.
Wow. No, yeah,
But
yeah.
that's not what counseling is. Counseling is actually a brave thing to do.
Mm,
And one of the
mhm.
most important things with a counselor to do is to build rapport and to help them understand, like, hey, we're in this together. I'm not here to cast judgment. I'm here to help you in your journey. Um, so, yeah, I don't even know if that stayed on topic, but those are some of the things that I've been learning and that I've been trying to implement in my writing and in terms just even with my daily life, even when I'm interacting with customers where they're like maybe struggling with something, maybe they just need to talk to me. I've had customers just come up to me. I'm like, what would you like today? Like, how can I get your coffee? And they're like, I just got fired today. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, I definitely want to get you that coffee. Like, do you want to talk about it or something like that? Like, just like you end up kind of counseling. Um, but I definitely just want to be that someone where they feel comfortable confiding in me. And I tend to do that at work because people sometimes just need to get it out.
Mm, oh my gosh. That was so beautiful. I love that sort of idea of your, yeah, how these experiences really do
Mhm.
shape, yeah, how you even just feel and how you can go through life being so busy, but like the little things that really do matter are those little sort of interactions and sort of like just learning about life and learning that things are okay and how, yeah, sort of like debunking things for yourself in a way and how that, yeah, influences your art and influences the way that you think and the things that you want and what you think is right and wrong. It got really philosophical and really deep for a second. I loved
I did
it.
not even mean to. It's almost like it's like 11 o'clock here, and I'm like, I didn't expect to be that. I'm just glad it came across well.
It
I'm
was
just thankful.
amazing. I could listen to you talk, like, and especially like those sorts of ideas about psychology and how even one topic that you kind of brought up really quickly was the idea of like romanticizing depression in
Mhm.
books and the whole Colleen Hoover thing.
Yeah.
How, yeah, that's really interesting. But I think we'll, yeah, sort of finish there because I think a lot of the listeners have a lot to think about and just, yeah, how to approach writing, how to approach living as like a really busy, yeah, young adult. Do you think we're young adults? Adults? I don't know.
I mean, I still feel like a young adult. I don't even
Yeah.
feel like an adult, to be honest.
No.
Like, a lot of people at my work, they're like, "You're, like, 19, right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm 23." Like, I'm actually in my 20s,
Oh,
but
no, we're basically young adults. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast this
Mhm.
week, Ash. It was so good hearing about your experiences. I hope studying goes well, especially for finals. I also have finals this weekend and
We're in this
throughout the
together.
next.
We got this.
I know. No, seriously, I'm so scared. I like 3 times a day at least I have like a mental breakdown about how scared I am for my exams. But when we think about it, as soon as we finish, we have November. NaNoWriMo, baby. Woo! That's gonna be great. Anyways,
That's
yeah,
gonna be so
thank you so
great.
much. Okay. Bye everyone.
Bye.